Benny Vasquez, chair of the Alma Linux iOS Foundation, with the keynote Building a No Drama Community. So, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I knew that was going to happen. Oh, we get to skip it. Sweet. I am very jet lagged. We'll start with that. The jet lag has been getting me. I have my notes. We'll see how much I actually have to use them. But thanks for having me. Thanks for coming. Thanks for caring about making your community and the greater community better. I'm excited to see this many people. The first thing we need to do is be very honest. I don't see that I'm going to give you, especially this crowd, any remarkable advice that's going to break your brain. I'm not going to change your perspective or build or present an earth-shattering argument for you. I'm not going to give you any charts. I'm not going to give you any OKRs that you can take back to your boss. I'm not going to give you a map to remove all dissent in your community, because that's not what this is about. The deeper I have gotten into community building, the more I have seen a very basic, if idealistic, approach to community building kind of getting ignored. And I've spent 15 years building communities for nonprofits, for-profit, like commercial softwares, for just people who are getting together, working on things that they care about. In doing so, I have seen a few consistencies that work and a bunch of stuff that doesn't work. And so we're going to take that approach. I'm going to tell some stories. I'm going to give you some guides and some general ideas about what I think you should be doing. And I think if you use those approaches, you're going to end up in a good place. I will tell you for free, there is no magic bullet. You have to do the hard work on yourself and your people, and then you see drastic shifts in the tone of your community. If there was a magic bullet, everything across the entire world would be better, right? We see problems for everyone all over the place. I'll also add the caveat that Alma Linux doesn't get 100% on this. This is a list of ideals, and when you use these ideas, if you apply these ideals, you will end up in someplace good. I also want to give a little bit of a definition. When I was in college, we started differentiating between the very real problems that we were having in life and the things that were caused by our own bad decisions with this capital A. The capital A is things that didn't need to happen, things that were driven by, like I said, our bad decisions or our poor choice in friends, or not prioritizing the things that needed to be prioritized. It does not matter what group of people you get together, you will find something to disagree about. Simon and I disagree about whether or not it matters when you put the tea bag in your teacup. My husband and I disagree very strongly about whether or not he should be allowed to raise a raccoon in my house. The answer is no, just so we're clear. No matter how much you do or don't have in common with someone, there will be something to disagree about. Disagreement is not the problem. Disagreements are going to happen no matter what, and aren't what we're trying to avoid in this. In fact, if you invite disagreement, you will get some of the best feedback you've ever gotten from your community. The most solid relationships and the best projects that I've ever seen are the ones that don't just engage with disagreement, but actively invite it. You need that feedback to make yourself better. When done properly, it'll bring your community closer together, and it'll result in a drastically better foundation for your community and your project to continue and get better. This is where we start with the stories, right? if my husband says that I have a red personality. I am the one that is the first one to put my hand up when there's something to be done. And that means that I have learned a lot of lessons in my life, both by making mistakes and making some good choices. So let's go with the stories. The first example, the first foray that I had into community building was this thing called LARPing, or live action role playing. I see some nods. When I was in college, we would get together, this group of people, every week. This is not my group of people. This is because thankfully none of the proof of that exists on the internet. But we would get together, our group of people. Every week we would spend 7 to 20 hours pretending to be vampires or werewolves. Every week we would essentially act as an improv group, or an improvisational acting group with each other, and create these incredible props and build these incredible stories. We had massive fights about the rules, about how to approach it, about the world building that would regularly result in broken friendships and relationships. But there was also power there. In building those stories together, in bringing groups from across the state together, we saw how much we could accomplish with just some people that cared. We found the resources and the spaces to bring 20 people together that would be shouting thunderbolt across the room at each other. And it's harder than you might imagine. We intertwined these backstories and then yes-anded each other into incredible epic stories that would take place across years because we worked together. This was a foundation of skills that I had no idea how much I was going to pull on for my actual job. And this is the lesson that I learned. When you build together, you have fun. If you are constantly fighting and pulling each other apart, that's not fun. But if you find the goal together, then you move forward together, and it is fun. It's a good time. That's the thing that makes it fun, is when you do it together. The first community building job I had was at a company called Liquid Web. We were a fast-growing web hosting company in the early 2000s, and I had moved from the support team into the marketing team, making the marketing team 3 people at that point. And we were I was tasked with building a user community around the people that used Liquid Web as their web hosting provider, using this new thing called Twitter. And my boss, the reason that this even happened is because my boss had just read this book called Tribes by this dude named Seth Godin. And essentially, the main concept, the main point of that book is that if you engage people positively together around your brand, they will go convince people that your brand is worth using. And they act as like customer recruiters. I combined Seth's approach with the default that Liquid Web had kind of built around, which was our support team can help. We had this brand, we branded the support team Heroic Support, because no matter what, we were all dorks and we wanted to figure out the problem. Combining that approach to community building with the default of helping meant that Liquid Web got to use the Heroic Support tagline for almost a decade, because it worked. I walked away from that experience understanding the power of just defaulting to helpful. It doesn't matter the context of the help, the level of the skill of the person asking the question, what or where they are trying to help. Keeping drama out of your community means when somebody walks in and asks for help, you help. And it's very simple. It's a very simply stated concept that is hard for all of us who are incredibly cynical. You also get that little bit of a mood boost that comes from helping too. After I left Liquid Web, I went through my I can build websites to build a company phase, which I'm nearly positive at least half of the people in tech have gone through. While I only did that for a couple years, I found that spending time with my customers and being very authentic with them meant that I had a much better success rate. The projects that I completed where the customers were satisfied were the ones where I took the extra time to make myself human to them and to make them human to me. It meant that how I communicated with them went better and was more in tune with what they needed. And it meant the project was actually what they wanted at the end, which is always the problem with web hosting, right? Or with web design. Your humanity will help you, no matter what. That clear communication that I had with them, in the long run, helped them by ensuring, like I said, the project was exactly what they wanted, and they were happy to have worked with me. The next time I got paid to build a community was for this company called cPanel. I got to put both my helpful and my human approach to community to use, and started building a user community that was incredibly diverse. For those of you who don't know, cPanel is a web hosting platform, automation software that allows you to automatically and easily host a bunch of websites or a bunch of users on one server. That meant that our community was both web hosting providers all over the world and their customers, because listening to feedback from their customers meant that we built a better interface for them. Every level of technical aptitude, every level of age, or every age, every location that you can possibly imagine, our community was there. With a community that size, we were consistently facing criticism for the decisions our developers were making. Even as a frontline support technician, which is where I started at cPanel, we became immediately aware, it was very apparent to us, that our marketing team had this bad habit of either overstating or exaggerating what our development team had done, the impact of what our development team had done, or the opposite, where they were trying to obfuscate or make it less impactful than it was. And that was entirely dependent on what they thought would sell and what our development team told them. And frankly, how much feedback our development team wanted from our community. Right. Building the community team there was like being thrown into a room where there are 100 people all shouting at you polar opposite requests. I want a black screen, I want a blue screen, I want mine to be green. All of it you could possibly imagine was there. While that position reported to our VP of development, I was empowered to immediately start pushing and start acting on this deep need that I felt to get our messaging straight. We needed to be honest and enthusiastic when asking for feedback from our customers. And honest didn't mean that we were trying to lie, but being forthcoming was really important. After 5 years of pushing that approach and building that trust with our user base, we went through an acquisition and then a price increase. And it was incredible. The feedback that we got from our users was awesome and brutal. Our leadership team knew that I had been pushing this approach, but they also knew how hard this time was going to be. So we were massaging the truth to try to make it nicer, try to make it easier, and try to reduce the amount of feedback that we were getting from our users. It broke the trust that we had been building with our community. So my lesson here was complete honesty beats everything. You have to be honest with your people. No exaggeration, no half-truths, no manipulation. When you're consistently honest, your community will trust you, and the drama that pops up is drastically reduced. From cPanel, the frying pan of cPanel, I jumped into the fire that was this company called Chef. The Chef community was in flux, shall we say. Just before I got hired in at Chef, there was a big blow up in the Chef community that led to a bunch of people very upset, a bunch of people leaving. And so my job was to help rebuild trust with our community and start mending some of those fences. For anybody that doesn't know, Chef is an automation software that you can use to automate your infrastructure. There's a bunch more to it, but that's basically what it is. Chef had all of the same problems that I had had at all of my other positions around community building, but there was another layer that was new to me, and that was that Chef is open source. So I now had all of the stuff that I was used to, and I got to engage with a community that felt far more empowered than any community I had ever engaged with. The root of the problem that I found at Chef was how the leadership and its users interacted. The leadership at Chef kind of split the user community into two. The first group was the paying customers, and the second group was the open source users. And often, far too often, the open source users were seen as a threat. Without intending to, the othering of the open source users drove this divide in the community and pushed away the people who were most likely to recruit more users and to contribute to the community, causing this irreparable damage in the existing Chef community was very obvious in that we saw the longest contributors, the people who had been around the longest, leaving angrily and loudly. The lesson I learned here: keep your community whole. Up to this point, like I said, all of the community building I had done was around commercial products. I had not experienced this at all before, but I became the loudest voice chanting this, because the only way we were going to serve our community was by serving all of our community. If you try to limit who you consider your community or create a hierarchy in your community, you reduce the diversity of ideas, the diversity of voices that are involved in your community, and automatically reduce the quality of answers you're going to get to questions that you have. You can understand that certain parts of your community are smaller or might be less impactful without dismissing them entirely, and that's okay. While I was at Chef, I was still there, I joined the Alma Linux community. Part of the reason I was so excited to join and get involved was that the folks at Alma Linux were already doing what I believed was most important. We were helping a community. The CentOS user community at the time was full of heightened emotions. It was just as in need of help as the people who I started to help on Twitter. It was just in need of connection and understanding as the web design people that I worked with, they were just as attuned to any attempt to mislead them or other them as anyone I had worked with so far. And as the Linux was born, it was immediately apparent to me how impactful this project was going to be and how many voices were going to need to be heard. Everyone using or contributing to Linux as a whole is there for a different reason, and those reasons are just as diverse as you could possibly imagine. Every decision I would say we, but we know that's not how open source works. Every decision that I make is driven by these tenets that I have learned around community building. These guides. If you let these statements shape everything you're doing and demand these things from your community, then you will end up in a good place. But as I learned the first time I tried to explain this to somebody a couple years ago, this isn't everything. This can too easily go sideways, and no matter what your intentions are, you need some guides to go along with it, so that implementation of these guides, or the implementation of these ideals right here, does the thing that it needs to do. So, number 1, respect your community. This is kind of the golden rule, but the golden rule only gets you so far, right? The first thing you need to do is start by setting a clear expectation for your community. So nobody's caught off guard when they come. They know what's expected of them, and it starts to set boundaries for everybody that's involved. The second thing, don't just listen to feedback, but actively invite it. It's going to be hard. You don't want people to tell you that they don't like something, but that's okay. That's your ego. Get over it. It is more important that you engage people here, because this kind of honest, early engagement with your community will do wonders for starting to build that trust that you have with people. Say yes. Oops. Say yes loudly and often, by which I mean, unless it is counter to your project's goals in a fundamental way, find a way to support and enable your community when they come to you with ideas, because they will. That's one of the most amazing things about humans. The more you find ways to say yes, the more your community will engage, the better contributions you will get from them. Saying no as infrequently as possible, and always with context and explanation, means that when you do have to say no to your community, they will believe the reasons that you provide to them. They won't be looking for subtext or the deeper meaning behind it. And one of the hardest things you're going to do is trust by default. If somebody says, yeah, I can do that, cool, I believe that you're going to do it. If somebody says, I didn't get to it because I got sick, I trust that you got sick. If somebody says, I ran out of time, I trust that you ran out of time. If somebody, this isn't assuming positive intent, because we all know how sideways that can go, but it is trusting that people will do what they say they're going to do. And if they don't, that's a different conversation. There's always that risk, but you have to start with trust. Because when you trust people, they trust you, and you can move forward together. You build together. Especially with volunteers, but honestly with anybody that's working in your project that you don't have any kind of control over, the most effective statement I have ever made to anyone is especially when they miss a deadline, I say, I trust that you prioritized your workload and your time appropriately, because I don't get to decide that. And when you say that to people, it relieves some of the guilt that makes it harder for them to get back on task and helps them move forward. because we're moving forward together. How can I help? Let's move forward. Number 2, hold yourself accountable. None of what I've said so far counts for anything if you're not holding your leaders, yourself, your community accountable to them. This goes for an entire community, not just, but certainly including your leaders. This is one of my favorite slides. We all have seen the most impressive examples of marketing spin. We know what this thing is. This is from Google. This is a feature that allows you personalized ads, right? Don't stretch the truth. Don't try to spin it. Don't present it in a positive light. This is the most beautiful example, but all of us in this room know what this is. They're not tricking us. They're not convincing us that it's something else. They're just lying to us, right? We know. And you break trust with your community when you do that. We will all make mistakes. It happens. Human error is not a thing we will ever get rid of because we're humans. Don't sugarcoat it, and don't back away from it. Don't try to explain away something that you should be facing head on. All you will do is reduce the trust from your community, either now or later on when they figure out the full breadth of the truth. I'll give you a second to read that one because it's hilarious. Similarly, it is extremely tempting to not talk about a mistake that nobody knows about. Nobody knows I did that. Nobody needs to hear. I promise you, the internet is forever. They will find out. And that means that it's not worth breaking the trust that you have with your community now. Just own up to it. This one feels really obvious, especially now that we are all in this like post-COVID, where we're not even post-COVID, but in this state where we're all much more likely to be working remotely and working remotely full-time. We are more aware of it than we ever have been, but enabling human connection can have one of the biggest impacts on the effectiveness of your community overall. Enabling connection can be as simple as having a team meeting on a video chat, but not starting it immediately. Start with, wait, John, what time zone are you in today? Or what is that picture on the wall behind you? Or, sorry I'm late, I literally forgot to put the coffee pot back in the coffee maker, and then there was coffee all over the floor, and then I still needed coffee, so I had to clean and also make another pot of coffee. I promise you that counts as 10 minutes. It's insane. If people feel connected to the team, even just a little bit, or the project, even just a little bit, they are much more likely to be empathetic and have better communication overall. When you have that empathy, when you can build that empathy in your community, people default to helpful, human, and honest. So now you've got these two lists. I've solved all your problems. There you go. But we know that's not true, right? I know most of the people in this room have some, version of what they just saw that helps guide them. But we know firsthand that all the good intentions in the world don't mean you'll never be challenged. So let's talk about what happens when somebody comes in with a disruption. Somebody comes in and it can feel like a personal attack, but this is where the real secret sauce is. This is how you make sure that even when there's disagreement, or even when somebody comes in that's not on board, you can keep the drama out. Number 1, because it always starts with us. If you don't know this meme, ping me on social later and I will get it to you because it's amazing. You need to be the stable, cool head one. The project is too important. Your ego cannot trump it. If you are letting your emotions guide what you're doing, you're going to disrupt the project yourself. The people coming in and causing the disruption are now causing a ripple effect that you should be providing a stop for. Do not add to the problem. Number 2, filter out emotion to get to the problem. Everybody that comes into your community with and causes a disruption, has a valid complaint. It might not always be a complaint about you or something you can fix, but there is a valid problem behind it. Go into the conversation. I used to call myself an emotion filter, because if you can pull the emotion out of what they're saying, you get the real feedback, and you can act on that, and you fix the problem, and now they don't have any anger anymore. You can also work together with them to solve the problem, and now both of us are together solving the problem. This one is also real hard. When people are ranting, they will always say something that's wrong. So what? Opinions, exaggerations, extrapolations, even personal attacks are not something you need to correct. You don't need to engage with it. In fact, you will get into the wrong discussion if you do. Take it direct if you can. Get them into a one-on-one conversation. A phone call or a video call is best. Direct email, direct DM, whatever, will also work. Because then you can have a conversation without the peanut gallery involved and without it feeling like they're on a stage. That makes the conversation far more effective. And if they won't get on board, it's time for moderation. It is our responsibility as community owners, community managers, community builders to make a safe space for our community. If people will not engage in the way that you want them to engage, get them out. They don't have a right to be there at all. They have valid feedback. Absolutely, I'm willing to engage with your valid feedback. But if you are going to be toxic in my community, I'm not going to let you be there. Because you will cause other people discomfort, and that's not worth the quality of your feedback, period. This has to apply, like even your leaders have to embody this. You have to, from the top to your team leads, to everyone that's engaging on a regular basis, embody all of these. This one. Embody all of these. And so now I've solved all of your problems. We know that's not true. There are limitations with this. This approach will limit your growth because if people are angry, they talk about things more, right? And so you will get, you will get, oh, that's right, I did this one. All of these approaches will limit your growth because your contributors will be slower to show up. They're not going to show up because they're emotionally driven. They're going to show up because they are excited to be there and they recognize what you're doing as positive. If you're not sexy or derisive or divisive, you're not going to be loud enough, and that's okay. Because what you get is stability. Your community is stable and nice, and that means you get to focus on building cool shit every time. Now you've got these lists, you've got what you need, and you understand why I think this is the right approach. Also, I'll post this presentation online for you later. I saw people taking pictures. But if you want to find me, you can. I'll be around today or you can find me on socials. I hope this allows you to do what you need to do to build a safe space for your community and overall make open source better. Thank you.